I have a commitment with my mom first, so please use this to go to the hospital. My husband hands me $20 from his wallet. Caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events, I could only stare blankly as my husband already drove away in the car. Incredibly, he had left his wife, me, in labor, prioritizing picking up his own mother for her lessons. Even though his mother had constantly belittled me in the past, I put up with it for the sake of our unborn child. But now I understood. Someone who neglects their child like this doesn't deserve to be a parent. Despite the increasing pain, I decided to face the childbirth alone. My name is Catherine. I married my husband, Bob, who is 3 years older than me, right after graduating from college. We were leading a reasonably happy married life. Bob had been a senior in my college club. He apparently fell for me at first sight when I joined as a freshman. Looking back, I blush thinking about how passionately he pursued me. When you're young, just the fact that someone is older can make them seem so cool. I reciprocated Bob's advances, and we dated smoothly until my graduation. Even after getting married, Bob was head over heels in love with me, so I was never concerned about him cheating. He'd always leave work on time, head straight home, and eat the dinner I prepared while it was still hot. I heard he bragged about it at work, saying how happy he was, so I figured no woman would approach a man who was so obviously devoted. However, Bob, from the time I met him, was always kind to women, and there were a few who would get close. Still, Bob was dedicated to loving me, so my eyes never wandered elsewhere. But there's a reason I described our seemingly smooth relationship as reasonably happy. That reason was my mother-in-law. I thought the age-old mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues were things of the past, but the moment she saw me, she frowned and said, "What's up with that hair of yours? Looks like you dumped ink all over it. I bet you dyed it last night in a rush, didn't you? Trying to look pure and innocent. It's embarrassing. Can you leave my son here and just go back home? Honestly, if you knew you were meeting us, you should have taken care of your hair well in advance." When I first visited my in-laws before the wedding, she said this to me, and I was terrified and mortified. As she pointed out, I realized my hair color was too bright the day before, and with Bob's help, I had dyed it black. Embarrassed and frustrated by being seen through like this, I was downcast for a while. I admit my mistake in etiquette, but I wish she had said it a bit more kindly. Being separated from Bob because of my hair color and virtually being kicked out of my in-laws' home on my first visit. Bob called me later and said, "I think Mom was just nervous and came off a bit harsh. She really does like you? Don't worry. She's on board with our marriage and wants you to visit again." At that moment, I was pretty irritated by Bob's nonchalant tone. She insulted me in front of him. He didn't stop her, and now he seemed to be defending her. There's no doubt in my mind that her request for me to visit wasn't genuine. Was she going to force us to live with her after we got married and constantly berate me? However, when I finally took the step to marry Bob, my mother-in-law made no such suggestion. I was relieved, but it was short-lived as she started frequently calling Bob to her home. He's finally done with college out of state and got a job back home, and then he gets married all of a sudden. I've been so lonely. Why don't you let Catherine have a break and come stay with me for about a week? When I saw such emails addressed to Bob, I was taken aback. Showing me the message, Bob asked, "What should we do?" Instead of letting him answer, I called my mother-in-law and said, "I really appreciate your concern, but we still have unpacking and paperwork to do. I think it'll be a while before he can take a break. I'm sorry." In response, she nagged, "You can do the unpacking yourself. Don't always rely on my son." I simply nodded and ended the call. She was pretending to care about me, but she just wanted her beloved son by her side. Was there no consideration for a newlywed couple? While I was irritated by my inconsiderate mother-in-law, I was also upset with Bob, who just went along without resisting. My husband says that his mother has always been like this. After she separated from my father-in-law, her overprotectiveness became even more intense. When my husband decided to go to college, she cried and tried to stop him. He somehow convinced her and went on to study, but apparently they used to communicate via email or phone calls almost every night. He always trusted his mother, who raised him as a single mom, so I've heard. They've always had a great relationship. It's admirable that he's devoted to his mother, but they're both adults, so there should be some appropriate boundaries. That being said, this has been their norm, and I understand that it's not right to judge another family's dynamics. If it weren't for this, my husband is great with housework and is sincere at his job. I even tried to be understanding for a while. However, it didn't take long for me to question their closeness. One weekend, my usually late-sleeping husband woke up earlier than I did and started preparing to go out. I asked, "Did you have plans to go somewhere today?" To which he replied, "I'm going shopping with Mom, Catherine. You can keep sleeping." I was at a loss for words. Not only did she not care about her grandchild's welfare, but she also said she didn't care. Even when I remained silent, I could still hear her shrill voice. "I'm sorry, Catherine," my husband quietly said. For a moment, I thought he was apologizing to me for his mother's outburst, but then I noticed he was opening the door to the back seat where I was lying down. I had no idea what he meant, and the pain was so intense that I was just dumbfounded. He then said, "I promised to drop off my mom, so can you call a taxi or an ambulance from here? I'll catch up with you, promise." Hold on a second. You're prioritizing her sewing class over your own child? I can't convince her, so you've got to talk to her. It's getting more painful. We need to hurry. I raised my voice, since I was running out of patience, but my husband grimaced and said, "It's a weekly thing, can't be helped, right? I'm sorry I forgot to tell you about it. Here's some money. Try to manage with this." He took out $20 from his wallet and shoved it into my purse. Then he went back to the driver's seat, and without hesitation, he drove off, leaving me behind. This can't be real. I was left not far from our home. Given the neighbors might see, I quickly looked up a taxi service. Meanwhile, I could feel the amniotic fluid flowing between my legs. Panicking at the thought of our baby's safety, tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled with my phone. Neither the baby nor I did anything to deserve this. "Catherine," suddenly I heard my name called out. I turned around and saw a familiar face. "You look so pale. No time to chat. Get in the car now." This kind person helped me into the back seat of their car. Her husband adjusted the front seat for me. The rest was a blur. As soon as we arrived at the main hospital, they wheeled me into a room prepared by the nurses. I was in so much pain that I was groaning, but I was told I still had some time before giving birth and should rest. The pain was so intense that at times I felt like passing out. Suddenly my phone rang. I thought it might be my mother returning my call, but it turned out to be my husband. Looking at the clock, it was already late afternoon. Nearly 3 hours had passed, and I was appalled that he was just now arriving at the hospital. I decided not to answer, but he kept calling, so irritated, I picked up. "Catherine, help me. I need you to explain the situation for me." It would have been nice if he'd at least shown some concern for me. I don't know what's happening to my husband, but for him to ask for help, even if he was about to be eaten by an alligator, there's no obligation on my part after he abandoned our child to help him. From then on, he often left me alone. As days went by, my morning sickness got worse, and I expressed my desire for him to be with me as much as possible. However, he replied, "What can I do? Even if I'm with you, Mom also wanted to be alone when she was pregnant and didn't even want to see Dad." Feeling physically and mentally drained, I decided to face this battle on my own. Furthermore, on a day when we were out shopping for baby items, we bumped into one of my husband's colleagues. Unexpectedly, he said to me, "I heard Bob's been actively attending parenting classes. Your bookshelf at home is filled with parenting books, right? He's gonna be a great dad for sure, shopping with his wife today. Can't wait for your baby to arrive." Surprised, I inadvertently blurted out, "What?" Bob quickly jumped in with a sheepish grin, saying, "Come on, stop that." Apparently, he's been portraying himself as an enthusiastic soon-to-be dad at work, even making up stories. Although I stayed silent to avoid an argument, I felt my anger boiling inside. Ever since, he continued to prioritize errands with his mother-in-law, and occasionally when we would meet his colleagues, they would always say, "Catherine, you've got yourself a dream husband," with a hint of envy. This kind of behavior built up over time, and I started to distrust Bob's actions and words. I can't say for sure if this stress was the trigger, but one weekend while I was making lunch, I noticed my pants were wet. A thought crossed my mind, and I immediately ran to the bathroom, fearing my water had broken. I shouted across the house where Bob was still asleep, telling him to get the car ready ASAP. Bob, initially groggy, quickly realized the situation and turned pale, rushing to my side to help me walk. I had been told by the nurse multiple times to head straight to the hospital if my water broke. Understanding the potential urgency of the situation, Bob was starting to panic as we were finally in the car and on our way, and I was beginning to feel contractions. Bob's phone rang. He couldn't pick up since he was driving, so I, fighting through the pain, glanced at the screen. A sinking feeling washed over me when I saw the name Linda, his mother. Staring at the screen for a while, the ringtone persisted. Thinking it might be faster to just answer and explain, I reluctantly picked up. "Bob, where are you? You remember today is our weekly knitting class, right? Did you forget?" I shivered at the cloying voice she never used when speaking with me, but I decided to explain it to my mother-in-law. "The thing is, my water just broke, and I'm on my way to the hospital with Bob." As soon as I said that, my mother-in-law started yelling at me like she was a different person. "What's that got to do with me? Don't use my son as your personal taxi service. Can I speak to Bobby? I've got my weekly sewing class today after all, and I had this planned first." That was totally unexpected. Apparently, she wanted to buy some clothes and wanted his opinion, so she asked him to accompany her. This made me upset again, but I tried to keep calm and said, "Today's our day off together after a long time. Why don't we do something?" But he shook his head, saying, "I'd like to, but I promised Mom first, and she seems to be waiting for me outside." To that, I was taken aback and rushed to the entrance in my pajamas. Looking through the window, I saw my mother-in-law's bright red car parked outside. Noticing my gaze, she stepped out of the car, smiling slyly, and said, "Bob, you're taking too long. Oh, Catherine, still sleeping at this hour, even though you're a stay-at-home wife. That's pretty lazy of you. Should I get you an alarm clock as a gift?" With her lips as red as her car, she laughed out loud, then lovingly took my husband's hand and led him to the passenger seat. I was dumbstruck, watching their intimate interaction, and could only watch as they drove away cheerfully. After this incident, I started noticing changes in my husband. He almost stopped doing household chores, which he used to do regularly, and began visiting his parents' house almost every weekend. His attitude towards me changed and became more demanding. "You're too lazy, Catherine. Whenever I'm off, you just sleep in. Do you think you're fulfilling your duties as a housewife? You even stopped wearing makeup. Just because you're married doesn't mean you should get sloppy. Even Mom's concerned about you. Maybe you should visit your parents sometimes." I don't know what my mother-in-law says about me, but my husband surely is taking advantage of that. He never complained about my naps or makeup when we were dating. But as my husband suggests, maybe my mother-in-law is genuinely concerned about my behavior. But considering how my mother-in-law treats my husband like her boyfriend, I can't help but think that she's just trying to annoy me. I hoped things would change once we had a child. Not long after, I started having doubts about my husband. I found out I was pregnant. My husband was ecstatic, his eyes shining with joy, and he held my hand, saying we would face this together. However, my mother-in-law's harassment only intensified. She would call my husband for trivial things like shopping, going to the doctor, or cleaning her house, leaving pregnant me all by myself. I tried explaining to my husband that her actions have a malicious intent towards me, but it backfired. Suddenly furious, he said, "Every time we meet, Mom talks about you, saying you should go to your parents or take some time for yourself. Getting mad like this will affect our baby. Just accept Mom's care and concern. Who do you think you are? How dare you say something like that?" I shouted at my husband over the phone and hung up. A little while later, I went into labor alone. It would have been nice to have a dependable husband by my side at a time like this, but if a clueless husband who can't even prioritize is around, it might be better if you weren't there. Instead, I had the support of a kind nurse, and late that night my long-awaited baby was born. Both the baby and I were safe after the birth, and I was so exhausted that I fell asleep right away. First thing the next morning, the nurse came into my room and told me that my husband had arrived. Apparently, he had come right after the birth, but since I was in such a deep sleep, the nurse kindly sent him away. Honestly, I thought I'd never want to see him again, but when he entered the room looking all gaunt, I couldn't help but ask what had happened. The previous day, the neighborly older lady who had always gotten along with picked me up when I was in distress and took me to the hospital. Because her son was around my age, she always took care of me as if I was her own daughter. She had been my pillar of support when I was newlywed and feeling insecure. When she asked about my husband in the car, I told her he was dropping off his mother for her hobby classes. She got furious on my behalf. I had no idea that her anger would push him to the edge. After she dropped me off at the hospital, she apparently spread the word throughout the neighborhood. Given that she was the head of the local community association, she had a lot of influence, and her friends confronted my husband en masse. It seems the situation was so chaotic that there were rubberneckers gathering around our house. Asking for my help in that situation clearly showed his lack of intelligence. I hadn't received a single call from my mother-in-law, and I had already made up my mind. "Can you please leave? I'm not feeling well, and my parents will be here soon. They know about this, right? I want to apologize." "Can I stay?" My husband mumbled in a pitiful tone. "What? I don't care if you want to apologize. I'll be busy, so leave." "Please don't say that. By the way, where's our baby? Let me see him once, and then I'll leave." "Just go. There are other expecting mothers here, so get out." Even after my cold response, he stayed, so I ignored him, turned my back, and pulled the covers over myself. "Hey, I'm sorry. Can you at least call my mom? I want to send her a picture of the baby." "Should I call a nurse?" My husband reached out and shook me. I couldn't stand it anymore and was about to push him away when, "What are you doing? Don't touch her." My parents had just entered the room. My mom rushed to my side, pushing my husband away. "How dare you shake a woman who's just given birth? And after what you did, how dare you show your face here? I'm so disappointed in you. Get out now." Even I had never seen my mom so furious. My husband was intimidated and finally left the room. My dad followed him out, and I'm sure he gave him a good scolding. I refused to see my husband during my hospital stay. After I was discharged, I took the baby and went to my parents' house. Afraid that he might do something, I brought up the idea of divorce over the phone. From now on, I'll be proceeding with the divorce through a lawyer and just informed him about the claim for damages. I completely ignored any objections from him. By the way, the damages I'm referring to are the scratches and bruises I got when he forcefully pulled me out of the car. He tried to make some excuses, but I told him I have testimony from the neighborhood lady and her husband, along with photos of the injuries from that day. He then kept silent. My lawyer mentioned that since this was gross misconduct towards a pregnant woman, the compensation might be substantial. While I was busy taking care of the baby, my mother-in-law Susan once stormed into my family home. The rumors spread by Catherine didn't die down easily, and the looks from the neighbors were chilly. Apparently, she was blaming all of this on me for not respecting their family. However, my intimidating father handled everything. With both mother and son driven away by my dad, I sometimes thought maybe we should have done this from the start. But my dad said the head of a family doesn't just easily step into the limelight, trying to sound all cool about it. Once I got the hang of parenting, I invited the neighborhood lady to my home and introduced her to my parents. She quickly became friends with my mom since they were of the same age, and they decided to keep in touch. The neighborhood lady shared a story she heard from a friend who works part-time at my ex-husband's company. This friend, like her, enjoys gossip and seems to have blabbed about the ex's story to others at some point. The tale spread like wildfire and got exaggerated along the way, and his reputation took a huge hit. Given that he had been posing as a devoted new dad and husband, the backlash was severe. He ended up being looked down upon by bosses and coworkers, leading him to quit his job. Approaching 30, jobless and without any professional certifications, he seemed to be living modestly, relying on his mother's retirement funds and savings. Becoming somewhat of a recluse due to the community's judgment. A few years later, I got a call from him. I almost forgotten about him, but his rude greeting prompted me to respond in kind. "I've moved. What do you want?" His reply was predictable, full of entitlement. "You moved. Living it up with the compensation money I gave you, huh? Must be nice. Come back right now. Let's start over. Mom wants to see you too." His ramblings made no sense. "Why would I go back to you? Are you still going on about Mom after all this time? Don't call me again? I don't want to hear it." I hung up without waiting for a response, but my phone kept ringing. When I finally managed to block his calls, he began flooding me with texts, begging for reconciliation. I read them just to be sure, but they were filled with nonsense. Don't you think it's sad for a child not to have a father? And even though you owe so much to Mom, not letting her see the child is utterly disrespectful. I deleted all of them and changed my email address. Though this whole incident was a nightmare, it allowed me to proceed with the divorce advantageously and take appropriate action against him. If a family member is going to be such trash, it's better for my child that they're not in our lives. I find comfort in this thought as I enjoy parenting supported by my parents, who have now become loving grandparents.